Time now to take a look at what's been making headlines across the globe. And for that, I'm joined in the studio by Alison Sargent. Hello, Alison.
Annette.
And we're starting in the UK with the announcement of the country heading into its third lockdown.
That's right, Annette. Its third lockdown, which Boris Johnson has warned is going to be the hardest one yet for the UK. The Times, on its front page, describes the coming weeks as a race to vaccinate the vulnerable, pitted against the explosive spread of a more transmissible virus variant. Now, The Times, which is, of course, a conservative paper, doesn't have very much to say about Boris Johnson's strategy, but the Prime Minister is getting a lot of criticism in the left-wing press. A left-wing tabloid, The Daily Star, depicts him as a character from the comedy Little Britain, which is a pretty British reference. Not everyone might know who that character is, but you sort of get the idea when you read the headline. It's a character that's known for saying, yeah, but no, but yeah, but no. The paper describes him as indecisive PM Bozo Johnson. Now, other papers are expressing pretty much the same criticism, but in a less colorful way. The Guardian, for example, writes that Johnson has been culpably slow to respond to the new phase of the virus. The Independent, meanwhile, writes that it's his habit of dither and delay that has led the country to this point. The lockdown, though, always gets him in the end. That's what we see in this cartoon from The Independent by Brian Adcock.
Now, staying in the UK, and of course, judges there ruling yesterday not to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US.
Yeah, this ruling is getting a lot of positive coverage, mostly in the European press. Swiss paper Le Temps headlines on the reaction of Assange's partner, who called it the first step towards justice. The paper writes that for now, Assange has avoided the worst, although his legal battle is not quite over. Both Le Temps and The Guardian are pointing out that while Assange has won this first round of his extradition battle, well, the verdict does little to protect press freedom. That's because the ruling had to do with his mental state and concerns that Assange would be a suicide risk in a U.S. prison, not with the judge's necessary desire to protect free speech. For journalists who have been concerned about the implications of Assange's case, well, this is basically the right outcome, but it is for the wrong reason, according to
Now, staying on the subject of free speech, the next story is a rather troubling one, isn't it, Alison? A young man in Algeria who's been given 3 years in jail for mocking the country's president online.
Yeah, this 25-year-old is a supporter of Algeria's anti-government protest movement known as the Hirak. We read in the HuffPost that he was given 3 years in prison for spreading memes online that mock Islam and the country's president, Abdelmajid Tebboune. Now, this man's lawyer, who was expecting him to be acquitted, said that the situation with his being sentenced to jail is very serious. His sentencing has fellow members of Algeria's protest movement outraged. This cartoon by Hik, published in El Watan, shows members of the military carrying the gavel of justice like a coffin. Now, the message here is that justice in Algeria is dead. According to Algerian rights group, the National Commission for the Liberation of Detainees, members of the protest movement have been arrested daily since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in mid-March.
Now, next to South Korea, where the Korean Times is warning of a demographic catastrophe.
Yes, this is after Korea's population fell in 2020 for the first time since the 1960s. As we see in this graph on the front page of the Korea Times, the number of births has been steadily dropping in recent years in Korea and was finally surpassed by the number of deaths. Now, the paper is worried about what the trend could mean for society without enough young people to fill jobs, serve in the military, and care for the elderly. In the paper's editorial, they note that the Korean government is well aware of the problem. They've actually already announced measures that are meant to stimulate the birth rate. Those include offering parents the equivalent of $270 per month per child. But the paper is calling for more radical measures that go beyond simply boosting the birth rate. The Korea Times says the Korean government really needs to focus on improving people's livelihoods by investing in things like education and housing.
Now, the next story is a change of pace. It's also about not so much not giving birth, but giving birth, rather, to influencers who've gotten into a fight after they both named their babies the same name.
The same name, Annette. And that name was, wait for it, Baby. Which
so original.
So I mean, in a way, it's original because it's so obvious. Like, it's hard to know kind of which one it is. Anyway, one of them did say she was inspired by the film Dirty Dancing. Nobody puts baby in the corner. Apparently, though, these influencers did use different spellings. One was the traditional B-A-B-Y. The other one spelled it B-A-Y-B-I. Still, it was enough for the two of them to stop speaking to each other. Too similar. Culture website The Cut calls this the first niche drama of 2021. And Annette, I do think it's interesting to point out that both of these babies are girls, and I think that's something we need to think about as a society, the infantilization of women at a very young age.
Indeed, but more importantly, when they're well into their middle ages and beyond, do they still want to be referred to as baby?
Probably not.
No, indeed. Thanks for that, Alison. And of course, if you want to take a look at the stories that we've been discussing here on the Press Review, you can, of course, head to our website, that being France24.com.